All right, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Kate Schwanhauser and I'll be your host this afternoon. I'm just so excited to see so many people joining us for today's conversation. Our event today is called You Have the Power to Protect Our Planet. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you some amazing victories that you all have helped make happen this year. You know, I know that sometimes it can feel like we are up against huge odds and fighting to stop something that's so much bigger than us, something like climate change. But one of the things that I love about this event series and really the work that we do at Food and Water Watch is that it always reminds me that every victory we have, all of the progress that we're making is because of each of us. You know, it's you, it's me, it's everyone who's on this call today and the actions that we take together that truly make a difference. So thank you all again for being here for our Livable Future Live event series. This is our final event of the year, and it's really hard to believe that another year has, already gone by. So I am going to introduce our speakers in a few minutes, but in the meantime, as we give everyone just another minute to get logged in, we'll go over a couple of quick announcements. So while I'm doing that, if you haven't already, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. You can share your name, where you're joining us from, and something that you are looking forward to over the holidays. So I'll start us off with just a couple of quick Zoom reminders for everybody. So please feel free to continue to use the chat box during today's events to share your thoughts and reactions. And it's also where we will share some links to resources throughout our conversation. So keep an eye out there for those. And Kia is going to be our chat moderator today. And all of her messages will have a big blue dot at the beginning so that they will be easier to find as you're going through the chat. If you have questions today, the best place for those is the Q&A box. So not the chat box, the Q&A box. So it's just a little bit easier for us to keep track of those and direct them to our speakers. And we will have a little bit of time for audience Q&A at the end. So feel free to submit any questions there that you have for our speakers today. If you need to turn on closed captioning to add subtitles to your screen, you can click on the Show Captions button in your Zoom toolbar to turn those on. And finally, I am recording today's event, so we will make sure that we share the link to watch the recording with everybody later. So for those who are new here, Livable Future Live is our monthly virtual education series. So each month we focus on a different topic. So when we return from the winter holidays, we will be picking back up with this series in January with a really special opportunity to talk with Nathaniel Rich, who is the author of the book, Losing Earth, A Recent History. And this book talks about the beginnings of climate denialism and the way that the fossil fuel industry spreads misinformation and propaganda. So we're really excited that the author, Nathaniel Rich, will be joining us for a live discussion and Q&A about the book, where we'll talk about, how we can overcome these challenges and move forward. And then in February, we will be talking about carbon capture and storage, or CCS, which the fossil fuel industry is trying to push as a solution, in quotes, to the climate crisis, but we really know it's a dangerous greenwashing scam. And there are a number of proposed CCS projects in Iowa that we are fighting to stop. So we'll be talking more about the work that we're doing on the ground there. So we'll go ahead and we'll put the link in the chat where you can sign up for these so that they're already on your schedule when we return from the holidays. All right, so let's get to it. At Food and Water Watch, as you know, we are fighting for a livable climate, and to do that, we must end our reliance on fossil fuels and transition to clean, renewable energy. And our strategy to get to this future involves continuing to fight the expansion of fossil fuel projects, shut down existing ones, ban fracking, all while continuing to build up support to expand renewable energy infrastructure. So today we are going to hear from some of my incredible colleagues here at Food and Water Watch to talk about some really big milestones in this fight and hear a little bit more about the state of renewable energy infrastructure today. So please join me in welcoming our speakers. We are joined today by Megan McDonough, who is our Pennsylvania State Director, as well as Tomas Rebecki, who is our Central Coast Organizing Manager in California, and both work to shut down fossil fuel projects and advance policy that will end our reliance on fossil fuels. And last but not least, we are joined by Oakley Shelton Thomas, who is a senior researcher here at Food and Water Watch, and he is our resident expert on renewable energy. So welcome. Thank you all so much for being here today. All right, so let's go ahead and just dive right into it. So as I've mentioned already, we have won some pretty major victories against the fossil fuel industry this year. So Megan and Tomas, I'd like to start with you. If you could both just share an overview of what has happened in your states. So maybe we can start with Megan and then go to Tomas.
Sure. One of the largest things that we won this year, which I am extremely happy to report on, is actually a ban on fracking in all Allegheny County Parks in Southwest Pennsylvania. We had seen a lot of, as you know, Western Pennsylvania is kind of, the new ground zero for fracking. We're surrounded by it. We've always seen Allegheny County as a very strategic place to organize. And, what we started to notice was that there were a lot of proposals coming in that were starting to encroach on our parks. Our public parks in Allegheny County is over 12,000 acres of land across 12 different watersheds. So we knew with them being vulnerable, what we wanted to do was really bootstrap the power that we had built on the ground over the last several years and take that to the county level. See if we were at a place where we could really pass a county level initiative. And we knew it was important to protect millions of people every year who are tourists to those parks, as well as the folks that live in the communities around them. And I'm very happy to report after a very, very robust organizing campaign, we were able to actually pass that bill. And so now the law of the land in Allegheny County is that there will never be any leasing or fracking in or under our county parks, which again, just goes to show really what we're doing on the ground here is very important, but that power that we built, we couldn't have done it without it. But I'm extremely excited about that win that we've had.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a huge step in the right direction. So congrats to everybody who was involved in that. So Tomas, let's hear what's been happening in California.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of great wins here too. And I just want to start with one of the most personal ones closest to me. I live here on the west side of Ventura, and for the past 2 years, we've been battling a compressor station it's only a couple blocks from my home. It's right across the street from our local elementary school. And this gas compressor that they're trying to triple the size of it's been known to leak methane, leak harmful pollutants, has the potential of exploding right next to homes and schools. And they wanted to triple the size of it in the time of our climate crisis. So we've been fighting this for 2 years, and we've gotten 2 critical pauses. This would have been built already last year if it wasn't for our on-the-ground effort to stop this. So this year, we got the California Public Utilities Commission, which is really hard to move. We got them to actually pause and withdraw the application of SoCal Gas and force them to resubmit a more in-depth application where we can get more environmental review. So it's still a win in progress, but that was just a huge win in itself, getting that pause. Very close to my heart too, because I have 2 young children and they will be attending that elementary school. And really quickly too, these are huge, huge victories too. And I don't want to downplay them at all because these were decades in the making, but we actually got a 3,200 foot setbacks from oil wells and schools and homes. And we've been fighting for this for over 10 years, especially frontline communities, EJ communities like mine here in Ventura, where we live within a mile, hundreds of oil wells. Some of my neighbors live within a couple feet. And we know the health effects on kids, on mothers, on everyone, elderly people. So we really fought for years and got 3,200 foot setbacks from oil wells. And it's going to phase out current oil wells too within 5 years. Unfortunately, the oil industry is already trying to reverse this win, but we're going to be fighting back. We'll talk about that more later. And finally, just coming off of this victory just a month ago, another decade in the victory in the process was we won a complete ban on all new oil wells in LA and a phase out. This is huge because LA is one of the largest oil producing cities in the country. And also this sets a path too for California and the rest of the country too, to go forward phasing out fossil fuels and banning all new oil wells. So that was over 10 years in the work from our LA organizers. So a lot of these victories, they're not easily won, but we need to defend them. And we're really happy about these 3 big victories here in California.
Congratulations. Yeah, those are really incredible to hear. And, as you said, they will make a huge difference in the lives of people in those communities and really ripple out beyond that. So thank you to everybody. I know there are people on this call who were involved in both of these fights. So just thank you for everything that you've done. And Tomas, you hinted at this a little bit, but obviously we don't plan to stop here. And you said there is going to be some pushback. So what is the next phase of this fight in California?
Exactly. So the oil industry, like I mentioned, as soon as we passed this historic biggest victory for EJ communities in a decade, they started collecting signatures. We have a referendum process here in California. The oil industry has abused it here locally, trying to undo our victories, and they're trying to do it now at the statewide level. They've spent over $20 million getting petition gatherers to lie to people, collect signatures at grocery stores, saying that this will actually, if they sign it, this will stop oil wells next to schools and homes. And basically, if they get enough signatures by December 15th, tomorrow, they're gonna be turning in their signatures. If they get enough signatures, and it looks like they will, this law will go on pause for 2 years, and we'll have to wait for 2 more years until 2024, and voters will decide on it if it gets qualified for a referendum. So that would be a huge devastating impact for our communities, because we're already seeing a run on permits. A lot of these oil producers that produce next to homes and schools, they're trying to get as many permits as they can before January when the law goes into effect. So if we have another 2-year window of a pause on this law, there's going to be a bigger run on permits, and more communities like mine are going to be seeing oil wells coming up. And we're going to have to, like we said, we're preparing to have to battle this out at the ballot. Like, we're pretty sure it's going to qualify. So this next year, we're really going to need to be ramping up, getting our field plan ready to make sure we win at the ballot in 2024, but also be pressuring our head leader here in California, Governor Newsom, who helped pass these setbacks. And this is one of his climate achievements. And we really need him to own that and to stand up to the oil industry. And we're going to be pushing him, especially because he's got eyes set on national ambitions. So we are going to be pushing him to implement a moratorium, which he has the power to do. He's done it before, temporary moratoriums. We want him to do a moratorium on all new oil wells, especially ones within 3,200 feet, because we know there's going to be a run on those permits when there's a pause in the setback. So we're going to be ramping up pressure. And to do all this, as we've seen, it takes years and years of organizing and building power. And we need to do that. We need to hire organizers to build that power, to continue to work in our communities and prepare for this, one of our biggest battles that we're going to have at the ballot in 2024. So as I mentioned, this is, as we come to the end of the year, this is really a critical time for us to be raising funds and to be looking forward and planning for next year. And like I said, we need to defend these setbacks and keep toxic oil wells away from our homes and our schools. This is the most significant win, like I said, for EJ communities and communities like mine. And we need to defend it tooth and nail. So I want to thank you all so much for your support so far in getting us here. And if you can please today, just donate anything, any amount makes a difference. We're building that winning plan to keep building off of these victories, but also defend these victories, which is also just as important. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tomas. Definitely an ambitious agenda for the start of the year. And as you mentioned, there is a real window of opportunity. So if you can donate, we do have a matching gift program right now, so that anything that you donate today will be matched 2 to 1. So that means if you donate $10, your gift becomes $30. It essentially triples your impact. We'll put a link in the chat where you can donate today to have your gift matched, or you can text the word gift to the number 23321, and we'll text that donation link to your phone. And again, this is just really going to help us start out the year on the strongest footing that we can, so we can defend these victories that Tomas was just sharing. So now, Megan, I want to come back to Pennsylvania. As we heard from Tomas, a lot of these are long-term fights, and I know that's the same for the Allegheny County Parks ban. So how is this built on just a longer string of victories in Pennsylvania over the past few years?
That's a great question. So our theory of change here in Pennsylvania has always been to start local, build local, and then bootstrap that to higher level initiatives and fights. So in Pennsylvania, what we did several years ago was we started what's called the Municipal Ordinance Project, where we go into local communities and we pass local municipal ordinances that are actually protective of the community members, increase setbacks. A lot of times what these do, in fact, is legally zone out fracking. When we had actually started this program in Southwest Pennsylvania, there were only a handful of ordinances on the books. I want to say there was 3. There was, the big ban on fracking in the city of Pittsburgh, and then a couple on the outlier. So we've actually been working on that project for the last 5 years. And we went from 3 municipal ordinances to now 24 municipal ordinances that now protects over 500,000 residents in Allegheny County. And what we started to notice was that power that we were building on the ground, folks were eager to go to the next thing. They were eager to go to the next level, which is, kind of where the parks ban came about. It was an initiative that was essentially revived from years and years ago by a grassroots group, Protect Our Parks, who really started that initiative when local leadership in the county wanted to frack what was called Deer Lakes Park. And, they had done a great amount of organizing. The board wasn't ready for it at the time. So we also recognized that. So what we did was, in addition to the municipal ordinances and protecting all of these great folks in Southwest Pennsylvania, was we organized to get climate champions elected to the board in Allegheny County. So we were able to work with that as well, plus the power we had built on the ground to really push this initiative forward and really start showing our power in the county. So it was a really great initiative, and we had a lot of great people join us for it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing progress to see all of that happen over the last few years. And, obviously this progress makes a difference to people on the ground, but Megan and Oakley, could you tell us how those impacts go beyond Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked. Because in Pennsylvania, some folks see fracking that happens on the ground and pipelines. They see the plight that we're going through, but they don't necessarily know why or how that relates past Pennsylvania. Probably the greatest example of this is the Mariner East pipeline. So really what you have is, from Western Pennsylvania, you have, the fracking that takes place in Western Pennsylvania, the feedstock that goes into pipelines like Mariner East, which then actually traverse to a facility called Marcus Hook, where it is then sent overseas to, Europe for the conglomerate INEOS, for actually the making and creation of more plastic junk, unfortunately. So that's really, at least from Pennsylvania's perspective, it definitely goes way outside of Pennsylvania on a larger scale and what we're looking at across different levels of pollution.
Yeah, I'll add that plastic, it gets produced, it ends up in the ocean, and it washes up ashore in places like the United States. It's all part of the same unsustainable cycle. And cutting off fracking at the source plays a really large role in denying these multinational corporations their ambitions to expand plastic manufacturing.
Great, thank you. And, another big topic in the news right now is the energy crisis that's happening in Europe because of the war in Ukraine. And so, Oakley, how would a transition to renewable energy help secure and stabilize global energy supplies in the future?
Yeah, I think what the crisis in Europe shows is that fossil fuels are a fundamentally unreliable source of energy. They follow a boom and bust dynamic that goes back to the very dawn of oil drilling. That's in contrast to renewable electricity, which just doesn't have this problem. Rather than needing to buy renewables on volatile international fuel markets, renewable sources actually provide a stable backbone, and they keep prices from suddenly spiking. And as we've all recently experienced, when those price swings happen, it gives corporations an opportunity to cash in on the sudden changes and make record profits at our expense. Another benefit of switching to renewable energy is that there's less concentration of resource availability with renewables. So that means that, unlike oil or gas, a renewable energy system doesn't arbitrarily give some countries immense leverage over other countries. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, there have been a lot of calls to double down on natural gas exports to Europe in the wake of the crisis, but this actually gets the problem backwards. We predicted that back in 2018, there would be this huge surge in exporting natural gas. We saw that happen. There was a massive expansion of liquefied natural gas infrastructure, and it was actually the result of overproduction of fracking in the United States. So if anything, flooding Europe with new supplies of gas served to undermine the viability of renewable energy in Europe, and it contributed to Europe's longer-term gas dependency. So these big infrastructure investments have these long-lasting consequences, and committing to gas is a commitment to new crises in the future. So it's really important that as we make these decades-long infrastructure decisions, that we make those in the direction of renewable energy.
Thank you. Yeah, and it just helps to exemplify how all of this is so interconnected. And, you know, one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we continue to do this work hand in hand is because, as you mentioned, Oakley, these fossil fuel oil and gas companies are raking in, you know, huge profits off of this type of instability. And so they're not just gonna, you know, shut themselves down, which is why we need to continue to keep fighting against them. And, you know, aside from that, there are these other immediate health and environmental concerns. And we had a great question come in from Roger about connections to water, which I think is a great point, and we can address that now. So fracking and fossil fuel infrastructure does have a huge impact on water quality and water access. So I was wondering if you could each talk a little bit more about how you see that in your own work, and whoever wants to start us off.
I can go ahead and start us off in Pennsylvania. Water quality and water access. This is a huge issue when we're talking about the fracking industry in Pennsylvania. When we talk about water quality issues, you know, really a lot of this is two-pronged, right? So the first issue that we have is, you know, fracking itself, the laterals and, you know, the migration of methane and chemicals and all of this like really terrible stuff that migrates to people's personal water supplies, private water supplies, but as well as aquifers. An example, one of the biggest examples of that, which I'm sure folks are familiar with, is Dimmock, Pennsylvania, really the ground zero fracking in Pennsylvania, in Northeast Pennsylvania, where Cabot Oil and Gas, which is now Coterra, contaminated the water aquifer and the water supply for many residents who arguably went 14 years and are still without access to clean water up there. That we're organizing behind even still now. Most recently, I would say there was a partial win in the fact that Coterra had to walk into a courtroom and plead no contest to a criminal charge, which put them on the hook for over $16 million that they now have to pay in order to hook those folks up to, you know, a private water supply, which is actually a public water supply. Which will be the first time that they've had access to clean water in 14 years. However, on the flip side of that coin, we did learn that at the same time, unfortunately, Governor Wolf's Department of Environmental Protection opened the door to allow Coterra to go back to fracking in Dimmock, which had had an over decade ban on fracking in the area because of the level of contamination that was there. So that is something that we're organizing behind and really looking forward to pushing with our new governor in 2023 to right those wrongs of the state. I think we've seen a lot of that in Pennsylvania. The second way that this happens that we've seen a lot of actually in Southwest Pennsylvania is the actual waste that comes from fracking itself, whereby the frack waste is taken to landfills. Unfortunately, it contaminates the leachate that then goes into the water treatment facilities in Southwest Pennsylvania, and therefore makes it way, you know, sometimes makes its way into, you know, private water or public water supplies for millions of residents. So we have had some really good champions at the state level who are working with us to address that as well, though, with closing the hazardous waste loophole in Pennsylvania, similar to what was done in New York. So we look forward to working on that in 2023 as well. But I would say water quality and water access are definitely a big problem on the supply side of this industry in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Tomas, I know that there are similar concerns in California. If there's anything you'd like to share on that.
Yeah, we have a lot of fracking, but a lot of cyclic steam and other types of extreme extraction methods that use a lot of water too, but also pollute a lot of our water. And we've seen here locally, we found traces of petroleum in our local aquifers, like the USGS, and it's near all of our concentration of cyclic steam and these huge projects that are going after tar sand. So not only are they using massive amounts of water, they're polluting future water. And actually, since 2014, the federal EPA caught our local state regulators asleep at the wheel. They had actually given out thousands of permits to oil companies for wastewater injection, because a lot of water comes up with these extraction processes. So they either put them in pits, just let them sit, or they inject it back into the ground. So our local regulators let the oil industry dump billions of gallons of wastewater, toxic fracking wastewater, into our clean water protected aquifers that are supposed to be protected under the Clean Water Act. And ever since then, they've been trying to fix that problem, but it's just been delayed. And as we're speaking right now, there's 3 aquifers in my county that are being illegally injected into by oil operators. So the oil industry is a massive problem for clean water, for future and for current water. But we also have another major industry that is even a bigger abuser of our water systems here in California, and that's the agricultural industry too. And we're growing huge water intensive crops like alfalfa and almonds, and we're sending them abroad. When we have families here in the Central Valley, we have over 1 million people here in California that don't have access to clean, affordable drinking water. And wells are going dry every day. And we're sucking up this water to give it to alfalfa and then send it out to Saudi Arabia or other countries so they could feed their livestock or horses. So it's ridiculous that we're letting people suffer in our own backyards and go thirsty. And in the meantime, we're sending luxury goods and products abroad, and we're letting the oil industry do whatever they want to, just injecting wherever they want and just extracting wherever they want. So water is a huge issue here in California, especially here in Ventura County, where we've been in severe drought for years. So we see it's very many big abusers in this process, and we have a lot of long ways to go to undo a lot of these problems.
Yeah, thank you. And that's one of the reasons why we are pushing for renewable energy, is because it would solve a lot of these water issues. So Oakley, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your research on renewables and water.
Yeah, I mean, it's really clear that extracting and producing fossil fuels is really bad for water. But something that isn't talked about maybe enough is that turning that natural gas into electricity and turning coal into electricity actually is a huge water user. These plants require steam to turn the turbines, and as a result, they extract very large quantities of fresh water. What this means is that replacing those electric generating facilities with renewables would mean consuming about 1% or less of the water that's currently consumed by those same thermoelectric generators. So it's a huge opportunity to ease water scarcity issues, but it also, I think, points to a reliability problem with existing thermoelectric power plants, where in drought-stricken regions, and that's going to be an increasing part of the United States, what were once considered reliable sources of electricity are not going to be reliable sources of electricity anymore because they rely on those scarce sources of water.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we have a great research piece on the water savings potential of switching to renewable energy. And I believe Kia is going to share that with everyone in the chat in case you'd like to dig into some of that great research a little bit more. All right, Oakley, I'd like to turn to you again. And if you could just give us a little bit of the lay of the land of renewable technology. Where do things stand today?
Renewable technology has improved immensely over the past decade. So just for a comparison, solar and wind energy projects now cost 15% and 30% respectively, as much as they did in 2010. So it's a huge reduction. And these new levelized costs are actually far cheaper than generating electricity from new nuclear or coal plants. And they're often cheaper than new natural gas plants. So that's meant that over the past decade, cost reductions and public policy fighting for things like this have more than quadrupled the share of electricity generated by wind and solar. Another piece of this is that advances in storage and reliability technologies have basically torpedoed the fossil fuel industry's claim that 100% renewable energy isn't possible because, quote, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Scientific advances now mean that off-the-shelf, commercially available and demonstrated technologies can support a power grid without any fossil fuels. And this has been true for several years, and it's even truer at lower cost today. A lot of people still have the mindset that we need to invest in finding solutions to climate change, but it's really not true. The solutions are already here, and now the biggest challenges are fundamentally political rather than technological. Saying that technology just isn't ready is a convenient excuse for incumbent fossil fuel corporations and utilities to do nothing, but doesn't actually match reality.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
No, exactly. I just wanted to add on to that too. We're talking about reality is caught up, and we've seen this here locally. I know Sandy Diaz is on here too. Here in Oxnard, we fought they tried to put a fourth gas-fired power plant in an EJ community right here on the coast. And for over 4 years, we fought with our local EJ partners, CAUSE, and other great organizations to stop that power plant. And during the whole process, we got other studies, and the studies showed that renewable energy was actually just as cheap. And as a result, we stopped that fourth gas power plant after 4 years of fighting it. And now we have one of the nation's largest battery storage energy units. So it's possible, and we've seen it done locally. So people keep talking about, it's in the future, it's in the future. No, but we need to be fighting for it now, and we can get it now.
Yeah, that's great to hear, especially some of those, real world examples where it is having an immediate impact. It's just more proof that it is viable, and we need to be transitioning even faster. So Oakley, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act earlier this year, is there anything that we can expect to see in terms of investment and build out of renewable energy infrastructure?
Yeah, so I think that the IRA funded a lot of things. Some of them were good, sort of positive technologies that are viable currently and have gotten some amount of boost from it. Some of them are dangerous distractions like carbon capture and storage. So I think it's sort of a mixed result. I think the biggest problem right now is getting the other half of that. So keeping the fossil fuels in the ground rather than just finding solutions. I think we need both. And I think the IRA does some good work on one of them, but doesn't address the efforts to keep fossil fuels in the ground that we desperately need.
Yeah, and we've, talked a little bit about how this two-pronged approach is so important, that we do need to keep fighting to, keep it in the ground, to shut down these projects and move forward simultaneously with renewable energy. So I'm wondering if each of you could talk a little bit more about why exactly it's so important that we are doing these things hand in hand.
Yeah, I can start here. So I mentioned earlier that renewable energy saw a huge surge in deployment. The troubling news is that happened at the same time that fossil fuel production in the United States actually increased. So what that shows is that only focusing on providing alternatives is not enough to actually shut down fossil fuel production. What has happened is that when there's a glut of fossil fuel production, fossil fuel interests have found new ways to make money outside of electricity, even though renewables are expanding in that sector. So they've benefited immensely from a surge in petrochemical investments, and that produces things, among other things, plastics. And then they also have really, I would say, tripled down on LNG export terminals to allow them to take the gas they were selling into the electricity grid and just sell that same gas abroad. Another really disturbing trend is that we're starting to see a little bit is in places that have sort of promoted building of renewables. They haven't necessarily coupled that with an effort to reduce generation from fossil fuel power plants. And in some cases, those fossil fuel power plants are giving preferential treatment and are operated at times when there's renewable electricity sources that could instead be operating. And this is really, really concerning because fossil fuel power plants always cost money to operate. They have to buy fuels, but sources like wind and solar don't cost money. So effectively, you have utilities and grid regulators that are intervening in the market to put a thumb on the scale for fossil fuels. And that's what happens when you don't pair renewable energy goals with efforts to actually curtail the use and production of fossil fuels.
Great, thank you. Wondering if either Megan or Tomas, if you'd like to add anything to that.
I would actually. I think that there's two arenas, at least that I look at in Pennsylvania from this, right? The Ohio River Valley, kind of Rust Belt perspective, is always that concern over jobs too, right? We've done the math a lot, that the numbers for folks that work in this industry in Pennsylvania are not actually what has been what the industry has put out to lead people to believe. However, we're still talking about, thousands of people who this is arguably how they provide for their families. So we definitely want to be cognizant that, like Oakley said, when we're working to shut down, we want to also be working to replace. We want to make sure that, there are still good jobs in Pennsylvania, even though, a lot of the oil and gas jobs, I will say, are not necessarily really good jobs or a large sector of our workforce here in Pennsylvania. But I think the other thing is, when we're looking at like the economic reasons for doing so, I think that there's a connection that is sometimes missed. Pennsylvania, arguably one of the largest sectors of work in Pennsylvania, is actually healthcare. And why? Because we're all sick. And I hate to say it that way, but it's true. And it's true because of legacy pollution. Again, Rust Belt region, we had, the steel industry, we had the coal industry, now we have the natural gas industry. So when we're looking at, replacing with renewable energy, doing that hand in hand, I think also there has to be a piece of this where we're taking those subsidies, especially those taxpayer subsidies, the things that we're paying for, that is given to fossil fuel industry, time and time again in Pennsylvania. And we have to start moving that towards renewables. Number one, for the health aspect of it. Why are we paying to poison ourselves at this point? That seems absolutely ludicrous to me. So I'd like to see us, putting a lot more of that money into renewables, and along those lines with those subsidies is retraining workers for this field. I think it's a better field to be in, and I think that it could make a healthier space for all of us.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. It's a lot of the same issues we're dealing with locally and even statewide, especially in Kern County, where a lot of our oil production is like working towards that just transition. And yeah, building between workers and the environmental movement has been tough work for a long time. And just on top of like the two-prong approach here locally, like I could just use an example as the gas compressor station. So yes, it gets gas from oil fields to our homes, and it keeps the pressure level. But like we said, they're trying to triple the size of it when demand is actually going down in our area. So our utilities are trying to like stick us with the bill of this expensive infrastructure, but we need to stop this. But at the same time, we need to stop like the demand for it and moving towards electrification. And a lot of regulators told us too, like if they saw more of a move towards electrification in our area, that helped our argument to stop this compressor and the need for this compressor. So we've actually thanks to a lot of our great partners and ourselves too, pushing that, like Ventura County, we've just moved towards electrification. So that's a ban on gas hookups in all new buildings. We still need to do more than that. We need to actually retrofit older buildings too, especially in communities like mine where we have gas appliances. We need to be put at the front of that, like in the IRA and other big spending packages, to make sure that, yeah, we need to ban new construction, but also we need to retrofit a lot of our buildings too, to get gas and toxic, dangerous fossil fuels out of our buildings for the people that have been suffering from their legacy pollution for so long. And we should prioritize communities like ours first. So we need to be stopping these dangerous compressors, but we also need to be pushing for electrification, which helps stop the justification for any of these in the future, and helps us locally too, like live a healthier life in our communities and even in our own homes.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that. It definitely sounds like it's a cycle, and it's all going to feed into the future that we need to see. And just really great to hear a lot of the proposals that are being put forward on that front. So I do also, before we move on to the next question, I want to share that we also have another research report that Oakley and our research team put together this year. It's a longer read, but it's definitely worth it. And it just digs a lot deeper into some great examples and reiterates a lot of what Oakley, Tomas, and Megan have just talked about. So be sure to check that out. And so finally, as we're getting towards the end of our hour here, I just want to ask, you've all mentioned a little bit about, what comes next? What does 2023 look like? But it would be great to just hear each of your priorities for the coming year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to hold politicians in the fossil fuel industry accountable, and to make sure that they're not promoting false solutions like CCS and hydrogen. There's been a sort of push to mix hydrogen into local natural gas distribution. So that's something that we on the research team are going to really highlight the dangers of that approach and the challenges. Something that's really personal for me that Megan mentioned is the holding the fossil fuel industry accountable for their jobs claims. I think it's just really important. It makes me really upset when they claim they're giving people jobs that they're not giving. I think something that should be a national scandal is that oil and gas production has increased, but jobs have declined in those sectors. I think that's, I don't know, it gets to me personally, and it's something that I will remain a priority for me going forward into 2023.
I will jump in here if you don't mind. So I have been doing this work in Pennsylvania for a little over a decade now. And I think that this is probably one of the first times that I'm excited to go into a new year, even though we're staring down the barrel of a lot of projects coming at us in Pennsylvania. And I think that's because I think we're finally finding ourselves in a new arena. Which is, we have a new governor coming in January, who was also our attorney general, who was the author of the grand jury report on fracking, which had 8 very good recommendations, I think, increasing setbacks, not allowing the revolving door of our Department of Environmental Protection employees to just hurry up and go work for the industry. We've had a lot of problems with that over the years. I think starting to be able to address that, I think that when we're talking about excitement for 2023, for us at Food and Water Watch in Pennsylvania, it looks like launching our volunteer network. It's really a lot of taking the power that we've built in Western Pennsylvania, taking the power that we've built in Eastern Pennsylvania, and really bringing those together to create a unified voice in Pennsylvania that has been missing. So I'm really, really looking forward to launching that and really getting to work and hit the ground running on our statewide campaigns.
And I touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but yeah, we are coming off a year of big wins. So I'm really excited to build off of those wins, but also, like we talked about, defending those wins is going to be really important. So I'm looking forward to staffing up, building up our power in the meantime, getting ready for the referendum. But also, like we talked about, this unique opportunity where Governor Newsom wants to show that he is a climate champion leader and wants to be on the national stage. And this is one of his biggest priorities and championships. So we want him to champion it, and we want him to defend it, and we want to get that moratorium. We're going to push harder than ever. Like we've always been pushing for this, but this window right now in this year in 2023 between now and the referendum is a great time for him to step up big, and we're going to keep that pressure up. So I'm really excited about that potential. We're in the strongest position we've ever been, but also we're going to have one of the biggest fights we've ever had too at a statewide level in 2024. So excited to build off of those, but also we have a lot of defending to do too.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, I know you've said that it is an ambitious agenda and that it is going to be hard. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think it's just really great to hear that, the enthusiasm and the opportunity that we really have to make a real difference. So yeah, I encourage everybody who's watching today to stay tuned for all of the ways that you can help us in the new year with this. So I want to turn to our audience Q&A for a couple of minutes and take a look at some of the questions that have come in throughout this conversation. So the first one, Oakley, I'm going to direct to you. We have a question about nuclear energy and whether that should be counted as renewable energy.
Yeah, so strictly speaking, it's not renewable energy because it generates huge amounts of toxic waste that lasts nearly forever and that there's not really a good solution for. I think people bring up nuclear energy as a cudgel against some environmentalists. They claim that environmentalists are not being pragmatic by not supporting nuclear energy. I think that the past decade has shown actually is that nuclear energy is not a pragmatic solution to a climate crisis, and that while renewable energy projects and investments have been massively successful, come in at lower cost than projected. We produce more renewable energy than was anticipated about a decade ago. A similar commitment was made to nuclear energy in the form of two very large new nuclear projects. Both of these turned into massive boondoggles. Neither is operational. They're tens of billions of dollars over budget. In some ways, nuclear is sort of a moot point because they can't seem to build it. And so that's in terms of fission. There's been some news on fusion also. And there was a recent scientific breakthrough. I can't speak to the physics exactly of it. I'm sure it's very exciting for scientists, but in terms of real world replacing fossil fuels, it's pretty much the same place we were last week. Fusion is still 30 years away. It's been 30 years away for 80 years. There are multiple scientific breakthroughs that are still needed to make fusion a viable commercial energy source. I don't want to get super deep on the technology, but I would not anticipate turning on your light bulb and having nuclear fusion happen anytime soon. We need to commit to real solutions that are ready now, like renewable energy.
Yeah, and just to build on that, yeah, there's other false renewables too being touted out there too. Here in California, SoCal Gas, our local gas provider, has been pushing renewable natural gas. And really what it is just methane that comes from these manure lagoons in the Central Valley. So it's incentivizing and promoting this horrible factory farm system in our Central Valley that's polluting our water, polluting their air, and it's giving them incentives to put it in a pipeline and continue the fossil fuel legacy of, destroying our communities, being dangerous in our homes. And on top of that, it will prolong fossil fuels too from just regular natural gas and fracking. This renewable natural gas is not renewable. It's detrimental to the environment, and it's going to prolong compressors and gas infrastructure like we're fighting right here in our own neighborhood that's dangerous for our health and for our safety. So yeah, we need to really be careful about these false renewables that are being promoted like it's a green alternative when it's just the same old.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great flag to mention that there are these other forms of energy that are touted as renewable when they're really not. So just something to be conscious of when you're, learning more about this, and just know that Food and Water Watch is fighting to keep these types of, false solutions out of renewable portfolio standards. We got another question that came in from Kaylee about how can we create wind or other renewable energy programs in our local communities? Any advice for people looking to advocate for these programs in their own towns?
I would love to jump in here. Listen, as far as solar is concerned, in Pennsylvania, we've seen, like a lot of solar co-ops popping up. I think that we have a very vast landscape and we have the ability to take that on. Community solar, municipal owned solar, systems for solar electric generation, power purchase agreement. This is all very near and dear to my heart. I have actually written local municipal ordinances that open the door for municipalities and residents alike to be able to really push forward, these local initiatives for solar energy in Pennsylvania. I would always be happy to talk about this. If you want to see me get real long-winded, I can help through that. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities in this space. I think from my perspective in Pennsylvania, I see a lot of opportunities with solar versus wind. But these can go across a lot of different arenas. The advice that I would have as far as folks looking to institute some of these policies or push some of these initiatives, especially for like the municipal systems, is understanding what your municipality is paying for. That is, some of the most expensive things that can be taken care of. A lot of times in Pennsylvania, I'm writing these because the local municipality actually wants to be able to use solar energy to run like their pump stations for their local water treatment plants and their sanitary authorities. Those are extremely, extremely not energy efficient, I would say. So the cost to the municipality, and especially when you're talking about like sanitary rates, those are all payer systems. So it's actually a good for everyone in the community. And like I said, there's also, various power purchase agreement abilities, and being able to open up your local municipality to that and really put forth some effort in outlining the good that exists for everyone in those would be at least my advice. And if you ever want to organize on something like that, give me a call.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So let's see. Next question. This one is about Senator Manchin's pipeline deal, which I know that we Food and Water Watch has been pushing out a lot of messaging to our members lately because it has come back. So I'm wondering if someone could just tell our audience who's curious about what is going on with the pipeline deal right now. What are we doing to try to stop this again?
Yeah, so this fall, Senator Manchin tried to push through a dirty pipeline deal that would fast track permits for fossil fuel projects, including totally greenlighting the Mountain Valley pipeline, and it eliminated critical environmental regulations. What we did, with your help, is we mobilized a rapid response to make sure other members of Congress voted no, and we won. However, Manchin is trying to bring that back by attaching it to a must-pass spending bill before the end of the year. So we're once again mobilizing to get as many people as possible to call their elected officials and tell them to vote no on his deal. So there are three things that you can do to help right now. One, you can call your senator and tell them to vote no on any amendment that would advance Manchin's dirty permitting deal. Or if you're on Twitter, you can share our tweet with the number to call and encourage your networks to also call their senators. And a third thing you can do is join our phone banks. We actually have one today from 4 to 6 p.m. That's Eastern time. And if you can't make that time, you can also sign up for instructions on how to phone bank on your own when you have time. We're going to put all those details in the chat. I don't mean to overwhelm people with information, but there are a lot of ways that you can get involved to fight this next deal.
Thanks, Oakley. And yes, as you said, we were able to successfully defeat this the first time, and we will do so again. It just takes as much support from all of you as we can get. So if you have some time, please check out those different ways that you can get involved in fighting this pipeline deal. All right, so I'm gonna have one more question for us all before we wrap up today. And I would just love to hear from each of you, what's something that gives you hope for success in 2023, something that you're looking forward to? And anyone can start.
Oh yeah, my bad, sorry. So something that's really exciting is advances in electrification. So unfortunately right now, many residential and commercial buildings, they're heated and powered by natural gas, but we've been pushing for building electrification, and we had a huge victory in New York City. So thanks to the incredible work of our organizing team in New York City, our allies and partners and volunteers, we passed legislation banning gas hookups in all new buildings within the city, which is huge. And now, as we start the new year, we're keeping the pressure on New York Kathy Hochul to take this mandate and apply it statewide. We have an opportunity to include this all-electric building act in New York's 2023 state budget. So this would be historic. New York would be the first state to do this and would set a really strong example for others to follow. I just want to add also that electrification is a really big deal, not just because it sets up for eliminating fossil fuels by getting people's houses hooked up to a renewable energy supply. It also makes a really big difference on air pollution inside people's homes. It can be a massive improvement in their quality of life. I have a young kid. It's something that worries me when we turn the gas burner on. And I think that there are a lot of parents across America who are in a similar situation and will be very happy to move towards building electrification.
And I would like to jump in here. It's always hard to follow Oakley, but I will jump in. For Pennsylvania, I have a lot of hope for the future of Pennsylvania and where we're going. I spoke a little bit before about how I really feel being in this arena, that we're in a different place than we were when I started 10 years ago. We've been electing more and more climate champions, not just to the state level between the House and the Senate, but I mean, we also this year saw a huge win in electing Congresswoman Summer Lee, in which case she ran on an anti-fracking platform and won. So now we have, you know, a new governor coming in that we believe is much more open to political pressure than ones that we have seen in the past. But I think the larger part is that there has been a real change in narrative in Pennsylvania. We're starting to see at, you know, county levels, you know, that are important, and, you know, like Allegheny County, Chester County, Delaware County, you know, all of the collar counties around that are starting to speak with the same voice, that it's no longer dangerous to say that you're anti-fracking in the state of Pennsylvania. But I would say for Pennsylvania, we have a really, really ambitious agenda. And it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to happen overnight for sure. But I think, as everybody's heard today, we have a really consistent, sustained track record of really moving in the right direction. And I know that we'll continue to do so in 2023. But obviously, we couldn't do it without, you know, all of you here supporting us either. So, you know, I mean, we're going up against the fossil fuel industry. So really every dollar we have really makes a big difference. You know, your donations build up our local organizing teams on the ground in Pennsylvania. And we work every day with local residents to build that power, show up at meetings, make calls, and do whatever it takes to fight these projects. Anything you give today will actually have a huge impact on this fight, especially with the match that's going on right now. Everybody likes when their money is tripled. So, I mean, again, you can donate at the link that Kia is sharing in the chat, or if you want to text the word gift to the number 23321. But no, thank you. And I look forward to working with everybody in 2020.
And yeah, just quickly too, just the hope for success, like we were talking about, there's so many great things of this past year that we've won that just gives us more hope that we're in the strongest position we've ever been. Like Megan said too, when I started here over 10 years, almost 10 years ago too, we never thought a lot of these wins would be possible. 3,200 foot setbacks, and we were pushing for 2,500 feet for the longest time. So it gives me hope that we've won on a lot of these things that they told us we'd never win. But the thing that gives me the most hope too is just our local fight. Like they told us, like, oh, you can never go against the Public Utilities Commission. They're not going to listen to a small little community. Like, and we got them to do historic things, to put stuff on pause, to like $1 billion corporation that always gets its way. Like that has given me the most hope. Just the fact that our community has come together, like our organization has just been behind us all the time with our organizing and given us all the resources we needed. They definitely picked the wrong backyard to do it in. But that just gives me hope. And like just seeing my kids too, like they've been part of this fight, going to protests with signs, and just the perseverance of my community and this organization just backing us up in all these fights is giving me hope. And we're just going to continue to win in 2023 with your support and continue to build off of these victories.
Thank you. That's really amazing to hear. And I just want to echo everything that you've all said, that it's really just the growing strength of our community that gives us all so much hope for the future. Kia's going to actually put a link in the chat to our 2022 year in review, just so everyone can see more of what you helped make possible. We saw over 5,000 new members join our fight this year, and our incredible organizers like Megan and Tomas have worked with close to 2,000 volunteers all over the country to fight against these projects and ban factory farms and stop water privatization schemes. So it's just really incredible to see the amazing efforts that all of you have come together to help make possible. So we are at the end of our time here. I apologize that we might go just a minute or two over. So I am going to wrap us up on our Q&A, but thank you so much, everybody, for sending in all of your great questions and for participating in this awesome discussion. To close us out today, I do want to just share a short video with you all. We played this at our annual benefit earlier this fall, but as we're coming to the end of the year and are in this mindset of reflection and gratitude, I just wanted to share it with you all again, because I think it's just a really nice reminder of how we really do all have the power to protect our planet. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for you now. So let me just get that up. And thank you all again for being part of today's conversation.
Many of us have been part of campaigns where we were told it would not be possible to win them. But then through persistence, through good strategy, through lots of hard work and the amazing work of our volunteers, we have been able to win those campaigns.
Here in my home county of Ventura, after 3 years of organizing, we were able to stop that oil well expansion. And when we were bringing people that live next to the oil wells out to these hearings, and they're giving their firsthand accounts and their personal stories, they had the most impact on the decision makers. The elected officials even told us they'd never heard from this many people from the community, or never really realized what these small decisions are having big impacts on people's daily lives. So we can make change, and it's going to be hard, but we just have to be persistent and we have to be vocal.
We need to realize that our role in government goes beyond voting. I see this every day working with our organizers. Everyday people making phone calls, sending texts, showing up at meetings, making public comments. And that's, to me, that's what gives me hope that we can make the change that we need to have happen.
I think research is an important part of Food and Water Watch's work, because the research team can really kind of aggregate case studies from across the country and the world to provide the organizers just with what it is they need to further their mission.
One thing that I'm really proud of that my legal colleagues have accomplished is we sued EPA saying that they were violating the Federal Clean Water Act by not requiring CAFOs to monitor the water quality surrounding their operations, and we won. It will have broad implications across the country for how factory farms are regulated, and it will arm communities and concerned citizens with the information that they need to ensure that the water surrounding their homes is safe.
Energy Transfer had spilled 28,000 gallons of drilling fluid into the lake, and when Josh Shapiro was coming to make some announcement at the lake, I was behind him. He couldn't see me as much as the press could that were recording him, but I felt like it got our message out to the public that the permits needed to be pulled and that they were paying to pollute. We call ourselves the ninjas, the pipeline ninjas, because we were out there fighting, and it's a pretty special thing.
I am involved in a lot of other organizations, but this one goes out into the community. It engages people where they live, doing the face-to-face, people-to-people contact. That's what I like about Food and Water Watch.
I volunteer because I want to make a better world. One of the things that gives me great hope as a volunteer with Food and Water Watch is that we are growing. We are building a movement.
I really, enjoy going to the different places, going to different politicians' offices, and it's important. They work for us, and, we need to get things done.
Every year we sponsor a bill to introduce a moratorium on factory farming. With Food and Water Watch's help, every year we get more legislators to co-sponsor, and so they've been very helpful in teaching us how to move bills through the legislature.
My favorite part of working with Food and Water Watch is definitely meeting new people, and I think that's also something that gives me hope, is seeing all these people show up for issues that affect them and their community.
And that's really what we do at Food and Water Watch. We have a long vision about what needs to be done. We are uncompromised in speaking to what needs to be done. And then step by step, we work and have the victories that you need to get there.
Fight like you live here, because you do.
All right, I I hope you all enjoyed that. Thanks for sticking around for a couple extra minutes to watch it. We had so many incredible victories this year, and it's all thanks to you. So we just wanted to share a little bit of that with you before we close out. So I do just want to thank everybody again for all of you being here today, and a huge thank you to everybody who has made a gift while watching today's conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, with your support, we are really going to start out strong in the new year. If you haven't made a gift yet and you would still like to, there's still time. We'll put the link in the chat for you one more time. And again, by donating today, your gift will be matched. So you definitely don't want to miss out on this opportunity to triple your impact. So yeah, thank you again. We really appreciate everything you do for Food and Water Watch and for the movement. So before I let you all go, just keep an eye out later this afternoon. You'll get an email or a text message asking you to submit feedback about today's event. So please go ahead and leave a comment there. Your feedback is really helpful to us. And then later this week, as I said, I will be sharing out the recording of today's event. And I will also include the links and the resources that we shared in the chat today so that you have access to those going forward as well. So thank you all again, and I hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season and a happy new year. Have a great day, everyone.